afternoon. Today is July 30th, 2019. Commissioners Court is meeting in special open session. This is a joint meeting of the Commissioners Court and the Hospital District Board of Managers. Item number 2 from the regular agenda. Receive a presentation on the El Paso County Hospital District FY 2020 operating and capital budgets. Item number 3, discuss and take appropriate action on the El Paso County Hospital District's capital and operating budgets for FY 2020 and proposed tax rate.
Good afternoon. This is the El Paso County Hospital District Board of Managers meeting jointly with the El Paso County Commissioner Special Budget Work Session. The time is 2:03. For the record, we do have a quorum, and I'll read into record our agenda items. Agenda item number 1, discuss and take appropriate action regarding the fiscal year 2020 El Paso County Hospital District operating and capital budget. Item number 2, discuss and take appropriate action regarding the proposed 2019 tax rate for the El Paso County Hospital District.
Well, welcome. Thank you for being here. I don't think there's too many things that are as important as what we're going to discuss today. So I know, thank you, those that are volunteering, that make extra effort to be involved in this process. So thank you very much for being here. And extra welcome to the people over there, our audience. Thank you for being here. It's always so good to have an audience and see the process and be part of what's taking place today. So thank you very much for all of you that are on that section. So thank you for being here. Okay, so we'll go through introductions. Can we start from that end?
Kathy Gibson, Chief Compliance Officer, UMC.
Jennifer Carrasco, Executive Assistant to the Board of Managers, UMC.
Assistant County Attorney, Chief Legal Officer, UMC.
Good afternoon, Lorena Navedo, Chief Administrative Officer for UMC.
Good afternoon, Frank Dominguez, President and CEO of Paso Health.
Good afternoon, Roxanne Weisendanger, Chief Nursing Officer.
Maria Zampini, Chief Operating Officer, UMC.
Carmen Arieta Candelaria, Board of Managers, Board Member, UMC.
Hi, good afternoon. Joy Martinez, Board of Managers, UMC.
And Steve DeGroat, Vice Chair, Board of Managers, UMC.
Good afternoon, Henry Gallardo, Board Chair, UMC.
John Ruckles, Chief Operating Officer of the El Paso Children's Hospital.
Good afternoon, Melissa Campa, Chief Financial Officer for El Paso Children's Hospital.
Good afternoon, Cindy Stout, CEO for El Paso Children's Hospital.
Good afternoon, Michael Nunez, Chief Financial Officer, UMC.
Good afternoon, Jacob Cintron, President and CEO for the El Paso County Hospital District.
Betty Flores, District Controller.
Good afternoon, Vince Pettis, Commissioner for Precinct 3.
Hello, I'm Carlos Leon, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Welcome again, Ricardo Samanio, El Paso County Judge.
I'm David Stout, El Paso County Commissioner, Precinct 2.
Carl Robinson, Commissioner, Precinct 4.
Betsy Keller, County Administrator.
Francisco Rios, Budget Senior Analyst.
Erica Rosales Negaglione, Assistant County Attorney.
Jessica Contreras, Commissioners Court Recorder.
John Law, Chief Strategy Officer for UMC.
Barbara Franco, County Auditor, First Assistant.
Cesar Nava, Commissioners Court Recorder.
Back to you,
Ileana Holguin, UMC Board of Managers.
Jessica? Jessica? I'm sorry.
I know I look like Jessica.
She's always my lead, so I'll go. Mr. Cintron, you're up.
So thank you all for being able to meet here as part of our joint session to go over our budget proposal. If we go to the first slide. One of the things that Michael's going to talk about is the ever-increasing timetable related to the budget.
Okay, beginning here today, we're Tuesday, July 30th, and next we do have the UMC regularly scheduled Finance Committee meeting that will meet tomorrow. Then as we move into August, our next, the budget work session number 2, if needed, is currently scheduled for Tuesday, August 6th at 2 p.m. And then on Monday, August 12th at 9:30 a.m., the Commissioner's Court will, as part of its agenda, propose a tax rate. And then when we get to the tax rate public hearings, number 1 and number 2, those are scheduled on Wednesday, August 21st, 6 p.m., Wednesday, August 28th, 6 p.m., and then when we move on to September, by Monday, September the 9th, the court will then approve UMC's budget and also tax rate. So that's the timetable that we have set forward, and we've worked on it with the county staff as well to make sure that our dates sync along with the UMC dates as well.
Michael, the one thing, I'm sorry, I'm sure you worked with Wally and Edward, but the one thing I do believe is Commissioner's Court may want to, normally they want to have a discussion during our budget hearings, which start August 7th. So sometimes the court in the past has wanted to have a discussion at its own budget hearing about the proposed UMC budget. So that's something the court may need to take into consideration. We may need to work out that the court may want to have a discussion on August 7th. I don't know yet. I haven't heard from the members of the court yet, but they often, after they receive this information, want to have a discussion amongst themselves.
Okay.
If you let us know, Betsy, then we can update the timetable.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Betsy.
So I wanted to sort of go over some of the highlights for the 2019 budget and our performance. We've had in many respects, a real good year. For example, we always focus typically on what we need in terms of funding and our plans for the upcoming year. But one of the things we wanted to let our commissioners know is that we really focused heavily in terms of improving our quality at the hospital. Some of these things we've made mention to you all in the past. When I got here a little over, about 3 years ago, UMC had gone through a very difficult Joint Commission accreditation survey. Our leapfrog grade at the time was a D, which was not good. And since then, there's been a big push in terms of improving not only the financial situation, but the quality aspect of our campus. So in partnership with Texas Tech and their medical staff, we worked really hard on really focusing in certain areas that would improve our quality metrics. For this year, leapfrog, we had gone from a letter D, grade of a D, a few years ago to a grade of an A. We're not alone in El Paso in achieving this great undertaking, but among the safety net hospitals in Texas, we are the only A in Texas, so we're really proud of that. Additionally, we received from the American Heart Association and the American Stroke Association, as it relates to stroke, we were on the Stroke Honor Roll Elite Plus, Gold Plus in terms of quality. It's the highest achievement you can get. And it's a testament to our comprehensive stroke program that you all helped support and that really helped us in terms of offering a top-tier service in our community. Additionally, the American College of Surgeons, their National Surgical Quality Improvement Program, or NSQIP, we received a meritorious outcome for surgical patient care in a number of categories. So Dr. Tyrock and his team, as well as we, were very proud of this distinction. And then recently, the Texas Department of State Health Services awarded UMC the Level 4 designation for maternal care. That is the highest designation you can get, and at the time, we were the first of 3 in the state of Texas that received this designation, and it partners real well with the El Paso Hospital's Level 3, Children's Hospital Level 4 NICU designation. So we're really proud to have the highest distinctions or designations in maternal care and as well as in NICU. And then we started our Malcolm Baldrige journey towards quality, and recently at the Quality Texas Foundation meeting, we were awarded an engagement level recognition, as well as we, along with the City of El Paso and the El Paso Independent School District, received a Pioneer Level Award for Communities of Excellence. And in this program, we work together to see how we can combine our resources to improve care not only in what the city provides, but as well as our school district and healthcare. So we're very proud of that. In terms of service line expansion, we assume responsibility for the healthcare services at the El Paso County detention services or facilities. We understand that the service has gone very well. We certainly, our commitment is to improve the level of care for our inmates, and look forward to expanding that in other areas such as dialysis services to be provided at the detention sites. Additionally, on August 8th, we'll be having our ribbon cutting for a new service for UMC, and that's the Interventional Electrophysiology Lab. And this is great for anyone that may have a heart rhythm issue. This is a service that, again, as part of the approvals that you all have provided us, it's an interventional lab that is state-of-the-art. We hope you can be there on August 8th to be able to see how it works. But it's, again, another level of service we're able to provide our community, especially those that may not have the ability to pay for it at other places. As far as El Paso Children's, they received the American Cleft Palate Association approved craniofacial team designation, and their oral and maxillofacial surgery craniofacial fellowship. There's only one of 8 fellowships internationally. Was started at El Paso Children's. You may have seen Dr. Yates at times describe the many procedures he now offers at El Paso Children's that is life-changing for many of our young members of our community. They also had a successful audit in their children's oncology group, and they, along with us, have expanded the pediatric neurosurgery program and craniofacial programs with the advent of Dr. David Jimenez, who receives patients not only from the El Paso area, but from all over, not just the United States, but international patients as well. So having him commit to come to El Paso, live here full-time, and offer these services to El Paso Children's is an additional step to being able to keep our patients at home. El Paso Health, slide's a little busy, but Frank Dominguez, who's over that program, really does a great job in running our health plan. We have begun our expansion outside of just Medicaid, CHIP and STAR, and to get into the Medicare Advantage program with the offering of the DSNP and STAR Plus programs. As of today, Frank continues to be the market share leader in terms of the Medicaid program at a 57% market share. He reminded me today that it actually has increased by a couple of points, so we're really proud of that. We'll know why that expansion continues if you go to the bottom bullet, where it talks about how he provides excellent provider satisfaction results. Currently, he has a satisfaction rating of 86.8%. Now, when you look at a national benchmark through the Symphony Performance Health, their national benchmark is 68.1%. If you look at the state of Texas, the Texas Association of Community Health Plans benchmark is 77.7%. So maintaining a high level of patient satisfaction also, I think, helps him in maintaining his market share lead. They're also first in Texas for the following STAR and CHIP 2017 Quality of Care Rankings: adolescent well care visits, weight assessment and counseling for nutrition and physical activity for children and adolescents, well child visits in the first 15 months of life in the STAR program, and the immunization for adolescents, which, given the advent of the measles outbreak, is a very important aspect of the services they provide. UMC additionally has continued to grow in market share in the following service lines: neuroscience, cardiovascular disease, general medicine, orthopedics, cardiovascular, cardiac, vascular, and thoracic surgery, and general surgery. Our growth opportunities are going to be in the neuroscience, cardiology, and orthopedic service lines primarily, as our city continues to grow, and quite frankly, as our population, like myself, begin to age. So these are areas that we're growing in market share, and it's a testament to the level of service we have. And when I say we, I include not just UMC and our private physician partners, but also our tech faculty. Many of them are the best in the city, amazing. And so with this partnership, we're able to show certainly great growth in this market share. Children's has also shown great growth in market share in cardiac surgery, ear, nose, and throat, general surgery, neonatology, nephrology, and urology, the neurosciences, and orthopedics. So again, you'll see later in the presentation how the results of this market growth and the other things that Cindy Stout and her team have done have really turned the corner for our children's hospitals in terms of their financial positioning. Michael?
Okay. Before we get to the 2020 budget, we want to just take a few moments to go back and see what's happened during this current fiscal year 2019. One of the items which we want, now what we have here is that these are actual results through June for the 9 months, but then also what our forecast is for the rest of the year. So the first line with UMC, you can see was it compared to a budget. Right now, UMC, we're probably about $1.4 million ahead of budget. When we look at 2018 actual, we are forecasting that 2019 for UMC will probably be about $13 million better than where we were for fiscal 20 year 18. And one of these things also does contain, which is a footnote at the bottom, this also does include a $12 million GASB 68 non-cash annual adjustment, and this is having to do with the TCDRS program, with the measurement period that we have, which is December, even though that our fiscal year is September. The month of December took a downturn in the stock market, and the overall plan had a negative return of about 2%. So thus, with the way that the accounting standard is that then we use that measurement period, and then we record that adjustment in our current fiscal year. So basically what happened is that the planned value of the assets decreased in the month of December compared to what the liability was. So thus we are taking a $12 million adjustment. It is non-cash. From the funding perspective, we are still funding at the rate that we are supposed to, but it would show that without this $12 million non-cash adjustment, we would actually be probably almost about $25 million better than where we were in 2018. When you look at El Paso Children's, you'll see in terms of compared to budget, we are forecasting that they're going to be almost about $2.9 million better than their 2019 budget. When you look to 2018, they're going to be almost about $9.4 million better in 2019 than compared to 2018. So you'll see both on the hospital side, UMC, and also El Paso Children, that's almost about a $22 million improvement in 2019 compared to 2018. El Paso Health, right now this one was as of June 30th, but based upon their 2018 numbers, we thought they were going to be about $200,000 less. Frank told us this morning that now that they're looking through their July close, that may be even closer to break even. So so El Paso Health will probably be a little bit better than what these numbers were showing as of June 30th. So overall, as a district, we look to be probably about $1.5 million better than budget for our 2019 budget, and then compared to our 2018 year, we look to be probably almost about $21 to $22 million improvement from 2018. So that's a marked improvement, not only as we were talking about on the quality side earlier, which Jacob was talking about, but as well as to how that's also turned out on the financial side. Looking at our district's current ratio, and the current ratio is defined as our current assets divided by our current liabilities. Back at the last audit, September 30th of 2018, our current ratio was 0.93. So what that meant was actually that our current liabilities exceeded our current assets by that 0.07. So the marked improvement you'll see here with the line has been in the 9 months. So now that our current ratio is 1.04, and that's going back to the previous slide as to how the operations have improved. Thus, our balance sheet has improved, and how that's happened is that we have also paid down liabilities. There's some certain liabilities that we had with the El Paso Collaborative, which is our private hospital partners. And this is having to do with all the Medicaid supplemental programs, UC, DISH, DISRIP, etc. Is over the past couple of years, that program in terms of the private hospitals share and UMC share, it was just a little bit out of kilter where we, UMC, actually owe the private hospitals, some funding for those previous years. We've been able to pay that down by about $14 million this year. Last year, that liability was probably about $22 to $23 million. We forecast that's going to be down to about $8 million by September 30th of 2019. But even in addition to that, we do expect that when you compare September 30 of 2018 compared to September 30 of 2019, that our cash balances will also be up by about $45 million. So that's just a reflection of the overall strength in the balance sheet that the district has had during 2019. The next slide we talk is about our average daily census, and this is on the UMC side. When you look at our average daily census, you'll see back in 2016 was about 177 patients per day. We're now up to about, right now we're forecasting about 209 for this year, next year about 212. That represents about a 20% increase in our average daily census over the last 4 years. But what this is also representing is that there are some capacity challenges that UMC is facing. Here right now, the red line shows that that's about 232 beds based on that's our about 80% occupancy. But keep in mind that's considering all service lines that we have. Now there are certain service lines, even in this year, that the bed occupancy is almost about 90%. So there are certain floors within the hospital tower that are just already starting to meet capacity challenges. So that's going to now talk about in terms of what's the long-term strategy for UMC in terms of inpatient beds.
And if I could add, about 20% during the month, 20% of our time, we actually run out of beds, and so thus the ER then begins to hold patients awaiting beds to be transferred into. So at times that could be as high as 22 patients waiting in the ER, thereby dropping our capacity down to about half of what that ER should be doing. So some of the areas that we have now, if you take out, for example, the maternal beds, we're running at 90% or better in terms of occupancy. So we're reaching that threshold where we're running out of beds. Additionally, we have, through Roxanne Weisendanger as a CNO, worked real hard in opening up new beds. So in this year, she's opened up about 37 beds. We've been able to accommodate this growth. In fiscal 2020, we're going to be opening up another 8 beds for a total of 45 beds. And then we're out. So, the challenge that we're looking at now, we'll be coming back in a few months to discuss with you, is what are our options in terms of being able to increase capacity for the ever-growing patient population we're seeing at UMC.
Next, Cindy will comment on El Paso's children's pediatrics challenges.
So we show a similar picture as what Jacob's talking about at UMC. We show something very similar at El Paso Children's Hospital. The great thing is that as we've continued to work with our pediatricians in the community, as we see them continuing to align their patients and wanting to send their patients to El Paso Children's Hospital, recognizing that there is a higher level of service here. So we've worked very closely, and in almost every specialty, we see increased market share. As a result of that, we're starting to see occupancy challenges as well. As you can see for our general pediatrics units, and we're specifically pointing this one out because this is a bulk of the volume, is that we typically have, on average, 21 patients there in that specific unit out of 26 beds. However, if you look at it in the perspective of your busy winter months and your spring months, we always have overflow patients. We have as many as 25 patients that we've overflowed to all the other units. So that means we're putting general pediatric patients on our hematology, our blood and cancer center unit. We're putting them in our PICU, which means, again, that we're limiting the capacity for those specific service lines. So we're also looking at some challenges here related to growth, but with those come good opportunities.
Next, we're talking about on the UMC outpatient visits. Now, you'll see here that since 2016, there's been about a 26% growth in outpatient visits for UMC, going back to almost 724,000 annual outpatient visits in 2016. In 2016, we are forecasting almost 906,000 total for 2019, and just a little bit short of $910,000 for fiscal year 2020. Now, yes, back about the 2018 timeframe, that's when the East Clinic and the Northwest Clinic opened up, so that did have a large impact in terms of when the outpatient visits, took a large increase. But that just shows in terms of the growth that UMC has had on its outpatient side. Similarly, on El Paso Children's, you'll see there's about a 7% growth from 2017. So there's about 42,000 visits in 2017, and we're forecasting for 2020 that would increase to about 45,000. So as with UMC, there is outpatient growth, for El Paso Children's as well, meaning that they're also going to need access to space as well, regarding any type of outpatient activity. Looking at the emergency rooms for both hospitals, UMC, there is continued growth. There's been about a 12% growth from 2016 to 2019, but when you consider for 2020 the new emergency rooms in the Northeast and the East, so where it's going to grow almost about 16,000 visits, that would almost represent about a 42% growth in the ER visits from 2016 up to 2020. Keeping this in mind, that even though with the increase in the number of visits and the ER visits, the left without being seen percentage, that is down to, I know it's less than 1%, probably about almost 0.5%. So that is something that's been, so despite the increase in the ER visits annually, the left without being seen percentage has been kept at a very low amount. So that's that's a marked testament to the department leadership at UMC. Looking at El Paso Children's, same thing, where there's been about a 23% growth in the ER visits from 2017 of about 22,000 visits in 2017, forecasting now to be about 27,000 visits in fiscal 2020. And this also included, there was a couple of rooms that were added on this year.
There's 3-bay fast tracks, so even though we brought those online, we've quickly filled those as well.
One of the areas which has been an ongoing challenge for UMC has been the burst. Now, you'll see here we went back to 2007, where we had about 5,000 bursts, and right now we're looking to be about 2,600 in fiscal 20 and also fiscal 19. That represents about a 48% decrease. But with that, on these next two slides, there's one that shows in terms of from 2014 to 2017 nationally, in terms of the declines by state. There's only one state that has shown in this 3-year period, which was Alabama, that has been positive. But in terms of all the other states, it just shows what the declining births across the nation are. And then the slide to the right is showing in terms of the decrease in births in El Paso County, where back in 2015 there was about 18,000 births, and now to 2018 that's going to be around 15,500. So one of the items here, going back to this slide, so although despite there's been a decrease in the number of births, we've still been able to maintain almost the same market share. Yes, I think we are down about 0.5% in terms of market share if you were to look at what our market share is currently right now to what it was about 10 years ago. One of the items which we measure ourselves with in terms of how much cash we collect for each adjusted admission, and the adjusted admission is defined by our inpatient admissions, and then we give a factor for the outpatient visits. So there's inpatient and outpatient activity in this. And looking at UMC's net patient revenue per adjusted admission, in 2017, on average, we were collecting about $6,400 per each adjusted admission. Currently, right now, this year, we are forecasting that's going to be about $8,574, and next year almost increasing to $8,900. So that's about a 38% increase. Now, this is not volume adjusted. This is how much for each unit of service that we are collecting, whether if it's through our managed care contract increases, the demographic information that we get from people at the registrations, making sure that care management and the nursing staff get the proper authorization for services. Those are areas that we've been working on over the past many years to try to reduce the amount of denials and increase the amount of cash that we collect for each adjusted admission. This is just a month by month for the last couple of years. The red bar is 2017, the green bar is 2018, and the purple bar is 2019. So you'll see that individually each month as to the increase in terms of the cash collections for UMC going back over the last 3 years. El Paso Children's will show a similar amount. So you'll see there's been about a 13% increase from 2017, where they were collecting about $10,169 per adjusted admission, and they're forecasting to be almost $11,500. A big reason for this is probably about a year and a half ago, El Paso Children's renegotiated all their managed care contracts with all the payers, and that is something that probably had not been done since the El Paso Children's Hospital opened up, back in 2012. So again, a marked improvement as well for El Paso Children's in terms of their cash collections. And you'll see here Children's for the last 3 years, with the red bar being 2017 or 2018, the blue bar is 17, and then the green. Now, two things actually happened here. In November of 2018, UMC began collecting or doing the back office function for El Paso Children's. And with that, you'll see there's been some improvements for some of these amounts between $8 million and close to about $8.5 million in terms of cash collections once UMC took that over. Yes, there was a drop here when you look at, for the month of June, but that was primarily due to there was some certain large claims that insurance payers were actually holding during the month of June pending their audits of those patients' medical records, just to make sure that the charges and everything were good. So that's also in terms of El Paso Children's, what their cash collections has done. One of the things that we've done over the past couple of years on the cost saving side is looked at what we call our full-time equivalents per adjusted occupied bed. Now, the lower the number, the greater staffing efficiency this is. You'll see in the red line, which was 2 years ago, and then the green line last year, and then the purple line currently this year, in terms of how the staffing efficiency has improved. And that's been positive to UMC's bottom line. Same thing with El Paso Children's. You'll see that the green line, that they're, for the most part, in most of the months for this year, they've been lower than the previous 2 years as well. So both hospitals, when you look at the revenue side, increased cash collections, then on the expense side, in terms of greater efficiency and in terms of from the productivity. With that, let me take a pause and see whether there's any questions regarding any questions upon the district's 2019 results.
Michael, I've got a quick
Yes.
question. On page 24, where that big drop occurred, and there were some issues that are yet to be resolved by the insurance. That was back in June, so I take it that you don't have that information yet?
Well, this decrease, you'll see, you can barely see it right here. In fact, right now, we're looking to see that we're probably going to have a bounce back this month, in the month of July.
Yes, and we have had a bounce back. What we've seen in July is some of that collection that we should have received in June start to come in the following month. I'd like to add a little something to what Michael said as an explanation for this, though. We did have the transition of also our HIM services over to UMC during the month of May. During that transition, probably was a 2-week transition period. This is when we started to see a little bit of a lag in the cash related to that transition as well.
HIM is the medical records component.
And that was one of the items that we had brought to this court in terms of one of the bond projects to be paid for, which was the electronic medical record system on the ambulatory side. We had been with Cerner on the inpatient side for many years. The outpatient side was on a different platform. So now, on June 1st of this year, they're on the same platform. So whether you're inpatient or outpatient, it's the same electronic medical record. So that was one of the items that that had been approved by the court many years ago, and we went live with that system June 1st.
Thank you.
When we talk about our 2020 operating budget, first off, in terms of our latest bond rating agency scores, Moody's, we are Baa1 negative outlook, which was issued in September 2018. Fitch Ratings, A- with a stable outlook, issued June of 2018. Standard & Poor's, BBB+ with a negative outlook, June of 2018. Currently, right now, we do have our annual ratings call with Standard & Poor's scheduled for Thursday, August 1st, and then with Fitch Ratings on August 15th, and then Moody's will be later on this month. So keep in mind, last year, in terms of most of the rating agencies, well, all three of the rating agencies went through a ratings methodology change. Previously, they used to measure public hospitals differently in terms of from the governmental hospital versus the for-profits and the large not-for-profits. The rating agencies went ahead and just grouped all hospitals, regardless of whether you're for-profit, not-for-profit, governmental, and use the same criteria. So you'll see there were many public hospital downgrades that happened in last year. With Moody's, there was 9 public hospital downgrades, 3 were in Texas. Fitch, there was 8 public hospital downgrades, 4 in Texas, and then Standard & Poor's, 3 public hospital downgrades, all of them being in Texas. So that was largely due to the ratings methodology change that occurred last year. So we'll have new rating agencies probably here within the next 4 to 6 weeks with the bond ratings. Looking at our service expansion, for UMC, we have the Northeast Emergency Room starting November 2019, the East Emergency Room December 2019. We also have the continued expansion of the electrophysiology program, and then with also with El Paso Children's and UMC, the expanded neurosurgery programs for both the pediatric and adult, and then with El Paso Health as they start expanding into Medicare Advantage with what's called the Dual Eligible Special Needs Plan, the DSNP, and then also later on in fiscal 2020, El Paso Health begins into the STAR Plus program. So those are the service expansions for the plan for fiscal 20. Right, this illustration is meant to show the complex medical supplemental funding in terms of us being a governmental hospital, in terms of how we provide the intergovernmental transfers, whether if it's going to be for the UC program, the DISH program, the DISRA program, the NATE programs, how UMC, being the governmental hospital, provides the state share, then it gets matched by by the feds, and then it comes back through in terms of payments. Some of them directly to the hospital, but there's a couple which are NAPE and the Network Access Improvement Program and the Europe program, the Universal Hospital Rate Increase Program, that actually flows through the managed care organizations, and ours will be such as like El Paso Health. So this is just an illustration as to how the complexity of the Texas Medicaid supplemental funding program is. Talking about the supplemental program, some of the budget challenges that we have moving forward, let me talk first about the Uncompensated Care Program. In 2019, the statewide funding level is about $3.1 billion. In 2020, we do not know as to what that funding level is going to be statewide. It could be as low as $2.7 billion, or it could be high as $3.8 billion. We do not know that number yet. CMS and HHSC are currently discussing those, and we will know what those numbers are probably late August, early September. Early indications are right now is that HHSC does not expect that the statewide funding will actually decrease to $2.7 billion, but that it would at least stay at the $3.1 billion. And our budget assumes at least current funding at the $3.1 billion. Now, currently, also what's going to be happening is in 2020, there's going to be a formula change in terms of how the Medicaid uncompensated care funds are actually being paid. Previously, and I'll call them 2 buckets. One, you're going to have your uninsured costs, and then you have your Medicaid shortfall costs. Your Medicaid shortfall cost is defined as what you would be paid at a Medicare rate versus Medicaid rate. So that difference was previously included in this UC calculation. That is now being changed, so going forward, beginning October 1, CMS is only going to reimburse uncompensated care based on uninsured costs only. So what was known previously as a Medicaid shortfall, that's going out of the equation. How that's impacting UMC and other public hospitals, now if you look at the type of patients that the public hospitals serve, we serve more uninsured than Medicaid, whereas the for-profits and the large not-for-profits serve more Medicaid rather than uninsured. So although even if the total statewide funding would decrease or stay the same. The public hospitals or the hospitals that serve more uninsured are going to get a larger share of this amount. So we anticipated at UMC that this will probably be about a $17 million increase in UMC's uncompensated care revenue in fiscal 20. Now, this will be offset by a program that I'm going to be talking about later about the whole Medicaid supplemental. It's called the Local Provider Participation Fund. So keep the $17 million increase, as that's going to be used to offset some of the increased costs which I'll talk about later. This is next is the DSRIP. So DSRIP is what's called the Delivery Service Rate Improvement Program. But this is a statewide funding level. Also, too, is about $3.1 billion. It's going to be reduced to about $2.9 billion in fiscal 20, and then next year in 2021, that's going to be reduced by about $2.55 billion statewide. What this means is UMC currently receives about $36 million in 2019. That's going to reduce to about $32 million in 2020, and then in 2021, right now our forecasts are showing that that's going to drop to about $20 million. And then in 2022, the DSRIP program, as we know it today, will be going away, so there'll be no funding for that. So currently, right now, CMS and HHSC are talking about an alternative funding program that's going to replace, the DSRIP program when the DSRIP program goes away in fiscal 2022. One of the other Medicaid supplemental programs is disproportionate share, often referred to as DISH. Right now, as part of the Affordable Care Act that came back, which came about back in 2014, there's been some funding cuts that have been kind of kicked down every 2 years. But right now, scheduled October 1st of 2019, there's going to be some reduced funding for the disproportionate share. Right now, to UMC, that would be about a $3 million reduction beginning October 1st. And then to El Paso Children's, that'd be about $1 million starting October 1st. Now, on the El Paso Children's side, there was, during this most recent legislature, there was, that's going to be partially offset because the legislature did fund, probably is a $50 million amount over the 2 years, over the 2-year biennium. That's going to then be funded, be paid for, and will be added on to the Children's Hospital's base rate. So that offset's going to be, it's going to reduce some of that DISH reduction. That's going to start October 1. Let me talk about the El Paso Collaborative Program. This has been a program that's been with us since about 2007 with our private hospital partners, HCA, and with Tenet. Now, one of these things is, okay, the program we know about that we've been in existence for the last 12 years, which we call the Burn Alleviation Program, is going away. It's going to be replaced by this Local Provider Participation Fund. CMS did not like the way that the programs, although they had been reviewed twice previously by CMS over the last 10 years, they came down and made a ruling to the state of Texas HHSC that says we have to move away from this program. So thus the Local Provider Participation Fund, these LPPFs, came about. So during the last legislature, counties such as El Paso County, Bexar County, San Antonio, and also in Dallas and Houston, we went to create these LPPFs. So what is going to be? It's going to be a fee that is going to be, we as a governmental hospital, like here for El Paso County, we are in control of this. So we will be assessing a fee to the private hospitals so that if they want to get paid for their DISH, or they want to get paid for their uncompensated care, or for the DSRIP, this fee, we will assess the fee, collect the fee, and then we will make that IGT to the state. So what this means here is that all those contracts that we used to have with the collaborative, we used to call it EPCCS, El Paso County Clinical Services, all those contracts are coming back to University Medical Center October 1. So what that's going to do when you look at our income statement, 2018 or 2019 versus was it 2020, our physician expenses are going to increase by about $50 million. But you're also going to see a $30 million IGT expense decrease because we are no longer going to be doing these IGTs for the private hospital partners as part of the previous program. And then also we talked about the $17 million uncompensated care increase. And then we also expect about a $3 million patient service revenue increase through the EURA program. all in all, it's supposed to be meant so it's a net zero sum game, so that Jake and I, we've been meeting with our private hospital partners over the past 2 years. We knew this was happening, but the intent was all of us wanted to try to still maintain the same benefit ratio through the Medicaid program, and not one system was going to be harmed by another. So some of our income statement line items are going to look very different, but at the end of the day, it's meant so that this is a net zero sum. So let me pause there and see whether there's a question on that, because this is one of the biggest items that's changing in 2020 compared to 2019.
The original LPPF would have created about a $20 million shortfall for UMC. And by going with this modified LPPF, ourselves and the other safety net hospitals, we were able to maintain parity so that, in essence, what we were going to lose with the burden alleviation program, we would make up with the LPPF and some of these other adjustments, the savings on not having the IGT. And the net result is that in this collaborative or this partnership, we try to maintain parity with everyone and try to minimize or eliminate that shortfall that would have happened had we not provided and received approval from the state for a modified LPPF program. So in that respect, it looks good. My goal was that we break even, and fortunately it looks like we will be.
And through this program, we will comment that, we've had a good relationship with our private hospital partners over the last 12 years in this. In fact, HHSC has often commented that this El Paso Collaborative program, that we all work well together. I mean, in these programs, there's other counties that have these similar programs. There's a lot of competition, so, and many more hospitals as well too. So whether it's we're just out one, because there's only 3 of us here, HCA, Tenet, and us, and also we're maybe so far west from everybody else, but HHSC has commented as to in terms of how well the 3 systems here in El Paso work well together under the Medicaid program. One of the items, okay, yes.
I have a question. As you previously reported about collections, we have an issue. Well, how are we doing with collection from the military and VA for those patients that you have in your?
I don't think, I can't speak for the other systems, but, we continue to offer our services for any VA, any veteran coming in. To my knowledge, we haven't had any issues at all in terms of collection. Haven't had any issues in terms of the service delivery for them. We know that as they run into issues of being able to provide enough support to provide timely service for the veterans, we, and quite honestly, the private hospitals, we've all met. We're all willing and standing by to say, if you run into a delay in terms of service, we stand ready to support. We've never had an issue in terms of reimbursement. Sometimes they require a pre-authorization. That's not any different from most private insurances. So far, things have been going well.
Good. One of the items which I want to touch upon in terms of which is a budget variable is this governmental accounting standards force number 68 that deals with the pension plan. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the measurement date of this report is December 31st compared to our fiscal year end, which is September 30th. The investment return is such a vital component of the annual plan's retirement expense. So, for example, in calendar year 2018, as I mentioned earlier, the plan had a negative 2% return. So thus we were hit with this $12 million non-cash adjustment in our fiscal 2019. So far through June 30 of calendar year 2019, the investment return for the TCDRS plan is about a positive 8%. So looking at that difference, that would be almost about a $6 million reduction if you look at our plan expense that we're budgeting for in 2020 compared to 2019. So, but that can change if the market were to make another downturn like it did last year. So this is one of the major unknowns, that we have going into. But we budgeted using historical information, 1-year returns, 3-year returns, 5-year returns, and so I just wanted to mention this in terms of what's what's one of the variables. When you look at the funded ratio, though, in terms of the TCDRS plan, as of December 31st, 2018, that was 86.8% funded. Since 2015, this ratio has ranged between 85.7 to 87%. Last year, when we had TCDRS representatives speak to the UMC Board of Managers, they mentioned that the 85 to 87%, that this was actually, we're on the higher end in terms of the average, in terms of where other TCDRS pension plans are. On El Paso Children's, Cindy?
Sure. Well, we mentioned to you all a little bit about the capacity challenges. Again, we've been working very closely with the community pediatricians as well as the family practitioners to understand the depth of services that are offered here at El Paso Children's Hospital. And again, we're starting to see a great increase with referrals. So we want to make sure that we have the capacity to go ahead and to continue to expand. We are expecting to see a decrease in the Medicaid supplemental uncompensated care funding. There is going to be a change in the formula distribution. We are waiting to see some of those specifics related to the children's care. I do want to make sure that I mention to you all that as a part of the bankruptcy agreement, that El Paso Children's Hospital owed close to $10 million to Texas Tech as a result of the debt obligation. We completed that and have finalized all payments to them as a result of carefully, again, continuing to grow our hospital and expanding our services. So we completed out that debt obligation in February of this year. Starting in October of this year, we're going to kick into repaying our line of credit, monthly payments of about $250,000 to University Medical Center. And then the long-term debt payment will begin in fiscal year of 2024. So we are on track with all of our obligations.
On El Paso Health, and Frank, you may want to chime in on this as well too, but on the STAR and CHIP programs, this will be the first time, at least in the last 10 years, that we're actually budgeting a membership decrease. Now, part of this is due to it is statewide in terms of the overall Medicaid members and also county. So we are budgeting about a 2% membership decrease. Part of that, okay, El Paso Health continues to remain, to remain the market leader as we talked about earlier, but they're also receiving probably about a 2 to 3% capitation rate increase in terms of their overall capitation revenue from the state. The two programs that El Paso Health is moving into, the Medicare D-SNP program, that currently right now has a January 1, 2020 projected start date. Now, because of the startup costs, now right now, although the program's not starting until January 1 of 2020, El Paso Health does need to be ready, demonstrate readiness to the state months before that they're ready. So there's going to be a lot of startup costs, a lot of hiring of people, FTE systems that are going to need to be developed before the actual startup. So right now, under the D-SNP program, there is budgeted loss for about $1.7 million, of which $461,000 is pre-program startup costs. Star Plus, now this is now expected, this was initially a June 1, 2020 expected start date. Now this has been pushed back now to September of 2020, and the same with on the D-SNP program. There's going to be about $1.2 million in pre-program startup costs. So this, so under the Star Plus program, they are budgeting about a $2.3 million loss. Now, currently, right now, this is what we're calling the investment period in terms of kicking into these programs, because the forecasts on these show that these could be more lucrative, or from a financial standpoint, even more so than what the STAR and CHIP business were. So these are the reasons as to why we're moving into this. Frank, any other comments?
I would just add that on the drop in Medicare and CHIP programs, it's a national price. You've seen the CHIP numbers roll out for the upcoming year, 6,000 across the U.S. And the Medicaid program numbers are dropping. There's two trains of thought. One, the economy is doing better, the immigration issues. So, again, we don't enroll members into the program. The state enrolls the members into the program. So, whatever they designate as an eligible member is what we get. So that's why you see the drops that are happening. Here in El Paso, for the first time, we've seen numbers drop for 3 consecutive years. In Texas, the caseload dropped for the first time in 20 years, the entire caseload across Texas. So that is a huge challenge because what we see is our uninsured number go up and the Medicaid and CHIP numbers go down. So that's really the balance that we're trying to work with the state. When it comes to the new programs, one of the challenges for us is when we applied for Medicare, we were hoping that in June we would go live with Star Plus. There's been delays from the state in releasing the awards. So now they're going to go into a new fiscal year. So we're not going to have the advantage of being able to grab some of those Star Plus members into the Medicare program, which we call the dual eligibles, where a member qualifies for Medicare and Medicaid. That was going to be our advantage, that we could offer both programs. Now we're going to have to wait 9 months to be able to do that. And so that causes another challenge for us in some cases with the budget.
Frank, I got a question on the statewide and county membership decreases. I thought that that population category had been increasing.
It's increasing for us. So when you look at the three health plans, Paso Health, Superior, and Molina, our lead over their enrollment continues to grow. But the entire county is dropping in membership. So more members are starting to choose to move over to us as a health plan of choice, right? Because a member has a choice, there's 3 health plans. But unfortunately, the membership across the county has dropped on eligible members for the Medicaid and CHIP program.
Does that coincide with the birth rate decrease insofar as births? As
Well, I mean, like Frank mentioned, I mean, part of it is the birth rate drop. Part of it is, you know, sometimes the focus on immigration, and the other part is as the economy does better, there's fewer people that may feel they qualify. For El Paso Health, they've really done a great program, and despite the drop statewide, despite the drop in El Paso, their market share continues to grow. It has been a great hedge over the hospital side because as the hospital does better, it may not do as well. As we do worse, it does better. It's a counterweight. What we're trying to do here is to then expand the service, not just from the young people in our community, but for the older generation in our community by offering Medicare in terms of getting into the Medicare Advantage mindset. The purpose of that is as the baby boomers like me continue to get older, this is an area that could be underserved unless we become involved in it. The disadvantage is for us to do this, Medicare expects us to be fully staffed, already ready to go before they give us the final approval. So we have to do this upfront startup investment before we see our first patient. But we do think that it has the potential of matching or exceeding what we do with Medicaid. So from the county standpoint, from the district standpoint, it will be beneficial once we get through the initial startup phase.
And the initial Medicare, the DSNP, the dual eligible special needs plan, it's a part of the entire Medicaid Advantage plan. So we're going into the DSNP program first, and then later on in the next couple of years, and then advance into the larger Medicare Advantage programs.
Thank you.
One of the things that we have seen in deliveries is that underage deliveries are down. So women under the age of 18, that number has dropped significantly in the El Paso service area. We're doing a study with another foundation here to check that. So really, our average pregnant member now is 24 years old. So that's pretty. That's better than what it was 12 years ago when there were more teenagers, you know, in our roles. So that's a change that we see.
And it's a number of change.
Women under the age of 18.
Because they could be at risk of lack of prenatal care. So in that respect, that is good that our teenage pregnancy rate is dropping.
One of the last items in El Paso Health, on the last bullet, as they start expanding into these programs, they're also going to be needing for some additional space to accommodate the expanded services. Now, as we start talking about, now about the 2020 budget, and now more specifically about the tax rate. So what we have presented here is under the rollback tax rate scenario, and I'll go through the specifics of the difference between the effective rate and the rollback rate. But this would demonstrate that using the rollback tax rate, we would be about an overall system-wide, when I talk about the system, UMC, El Paso Children's, El Paso Health, and the Foundation, to be about a $1.2 million loss for was it for fiscal 2020. When you look at on the district as a whole, you'll see that our total revenue budget will be about $856 million. Now, the item in blue, which is patient service revenue, is about 44%, or about $378 million. The footnote down at the bottom of the slide, when you look at our patient service revenue, back in 2017, that was about 39.8%. Now, when you're looking at what we have proposed for the 2020 budget, that's about 44.2%. So over the past 3 or 4 years, our revenue budget has grown in the patient service revenue area. That's where you want it to grow, because now you're having less reliance on other sources, which is going to be like your Medicaid supplementals, property tax revenues, etc. So that's that's a nice trend to have. On the revenue assumptions for UMC, on the inpatient side, you'll see that we're inpatient admissions. We're expecting about a 1.4% growth. Earlier, we talked about some of the capacity challenges, because in certain floors, there's not many more admissions that we're going to be able to add in those certain floors. So we budget very conservatively, about 1.4%. Inpatient surgery growth about 2%. Outpatient surgery is almost about 7%. And then we talked about the Northeast and the East ERs, with about 8,700 at the Northeast and about 7,900 at the East Emergency Room. Our outpatient visits increasing about 0.3%. And our payer mix as a whole, 64% funded, 36% unfunded. If we rolled this back to almost about 12 years ago, that was closer to about 52%, it was about 52% unfunded and about 48% funded. So you can see over the last 12, 13 years as to how much we've been able to improve our payer mix more to the funded side. We talk about the Medicaid supplemental revenue programs. The UC's increased to 17 million. DSRIP is down about 4. DISH is down about 3. And then the correctional health. This contract revenue, this revenue itself, not net, is about $8 million, but for the main reason, we're only going to have it for 5 months in 2019. Next year, it'll be a full 12-month year. And El Paso Children's net inpatient admissions to increase about 7%. Surgeries overall to increase about 6.5%. And then we talked about the add-on base rate as a result of the recent legislative funding and the Medicaid supplemental as to how that's also decreasing. El Paso Health, the 2% STAR and CHIP membership decrease, the increased capitation premium rates of 3%, and then talking about the Medicare D-SNP and the STAR Plus program, which are starting in January and also September. On the expense side, you'll see the total expenses about $857 million. So here, with the largest share being in the blue in terms of salaries and wages of about $282 million. Medical claims in orange about $174 million, which is related to El Paso Health, and then followed by supplies, purchase services, physician costs, etc. So that's the total expense budget, about $857 million. Some of the key expense assumptions on salaries and wages. We are proposing, with a rollback tax rate scenario, to move from the $10 minimum wage to $11, implemented in the fourth quarter of 2020 with a cost of about $1.2 million. 1% merit increase, approximating about $2 million. And then we're also going to have now the full year of the 2019 market adjustments that were just implemented this month of July of 2019. And then we also have planned 2020 fourth quarter market adjustments, and those two have a combined cost of about $3.2 million. So you'll see total salaries in terms of dollars being invested into our associates is almost about $6.4 million in fiscal 2020. We are increasing the expenses, FTE increase because of the emergency rooms, the neighborhood clinics at El Paso Health and Medicare D-SNP and the STAR Plus program. Employee benefits, our TCDRS employer contribution rate is increasing from 7.3% to 7.84%. A large part of that was due to the 2018 negative loss of, or the negative returns for the plan. And then we do talk about the GASB 68 that we talked about earlier. A couple of other things on computer fees. It's about $8 million increase. $5 million of that is from El Paso Health because of their investment in the Medicare and the Star Plus programs. And then $3 million on the UMC side as we just went live with a new Cerner ambulatory EMR system. Children's salaries and wages, about a 2% merit, which is about a $400,000 cost. Now keep in mind the history with El Paso Children, since they started back in 2012, they had not had a merit increase until last year. Last year was the first merit increase, and then this 2020 will be the second. And then on the employee benefits, no increase in their health insurance premiums.
So that's pretty big. No increase in the health insurance?
That's correct.
Yeah, with El Paso Children's, yes. Yes. On the UMC side, there will be a slight increase, and we are still finalizing those amounts on the UMC side. What this slide is to represent is, this is a measure looking at what's our cost to provide uncompensated care, which is in blue, versus what we get in maintenance and operations, property tax revenue, which is in orange, and then the gray slide in terms of what's the difference between the two. You'll see back in 2017, we provided about $155 million in uncompensated care costs, not our charges, but what it costs us to provide the care, and we received $69 million in maintenance and operations property tax, so a shortfall of about $86 million. We look to the 2020 budget, we are forecasting that the estimated uncompensated care costs will be about $190 million, and even if we went to the rollback rate, we would get about $96 million in maintenance and operations tax, so it shows that the delta is about $94 million. So even over the past 4 years, you'll see that the negative spread has gone up, where it was $86 million back in 2017, where it could be $94 million in 2020. So that's about an $8 million increase $8 million increase in the difference between what it costs us to provide uncompensated care versus what we're receiving in property tax revenue on maintenance and operations.
So in pure dollars, the M&O rate is not keeping up with the increase in uncompensated costs, which then means that UMC has to make up that shortfall. That $94 million gap is made up through our efforts in increasing revenue through other ways. And so as a credit to the fiscal team and the rest of the team here, that despite starting off in terms of cost that big of a hole, that throughout the year we try to make it up through other efforts, so that we address the being able to provide that uncompensated care without compromise.
This next slide is showing UMC El Paso compared to the other 4 large public hospitals in the state of Texas. Now this is not system-wide, but just UMC El Paso alone compared with what I'll call the sister hospitals of those areas. You'll see that on the UMC El Paso budget, it's a proposed budget of $553 million. The arrow, which is showing the gray area, showing that our property taxes, and this is with the rollback the tax rate scenario, that it's 21% of UMC's revenue budget. If you look at Harris Health in Houston, and this for Harris Health in Houston, JPS, and Parkland, this is based upon the most recent audited financial statement, so it's not necessarily what their current budget is, but what their most recent audited financials are. Harris Health in Houston, you'll see that of their $1.4 billion revenue budget, 50% of their revenues come from property taxes. JPS in Fort Worth, $931 total in revenue budget, 38% comes from property taxes, and then the two Parkland Health and University Health in San Antonio, 32% of their revenue budgets come from property taxes. So this shows in terms of UMC El Paso, where we're at 21%. In terms of, just like Jacob was talking about earlier, in terms of how much less we get in property taxes as part of our revenue budget, in terms of comparison to the other 4 large public hospital districts. Any comments or questions on that? Now let me talk. Now this is I know this is kind of hard to see on the screen, but this is talking about the property tax scenarios. And I've laid this out the way that we laid it out last year in terms of the format that the court wishes to see. So there's 3 columns from left to right. We have our fiscal year 2019, And then the two on the right are going to be for fiscal year 2020, what's the effective tax rate versus what the rollback tax rate scenario is. So to recap for 2019, our current tax rate is 0.251943. The estimated, the taxable value of El Paso properties was about $43.6 billion to generate about $110 million in property tax revenues in fiscal 2019. The average home value is $129,600, so an annual tax bill of $327. Now moving on over to the second column, which is the effective tax rate scenario. As we've been discussing with at our Board of Managers meeting, Finance Committee meeting, and then also with our individual meetings with you, the effective tax rate did go up from the stated rate that we currently have. So the effective tax rate currently right now for 2020 is 0.253519. The total taxable values, including new properties and improvements, is about $44.7 billion. That would generate a property tax revenue of about $113 million. That's about a $3.5 million increase over what we are currently receiving, of which $2 million of that is coming in from new properties and improvements, and about $1.5 million is coming in from simply the change in the rate from the current rate to the effective rate. On an average home value now of $133,590, that'd be an annual tax bill of $338, so an annual increase of about $12 and a monthly increase of $1. So that's under the effective tax rate scenario. Under the rollback tax rate scenario, which we are proposing, is that the rollback was 0.267747, which would represent about a 5.6% increase from the current stated rate. Now keep in mind, yes, we can go back 8% on the rollback, but since there's two components, the overall rate increases about 5.6%. That would generate about $119.7 million in property tax revenue, so an increase of about $9.9 million from 2019. And the variance between the effective tax rate and the rollback tax rate is about $6.4 million. So based upon an average home value of $133,590, that would represent an annual property tax bill of $357. So compared the rollback tax rate scenario for 2020 compared to 2019, that'd be an increase of about $31 annually, or about $2.59 per month. So those are the two tax rate scenarios, the effective tax rate and the rollback tax rate. And one of the main reasons why we, the management, and are recommending going the rollback tax rate, one, it's going to get us closer to break even. With the rollback tax rate, we're coming in probably about a $1.3 million loss. One illustrated by this slide in terms of the cost that for us to provide the cost for uncompensated care, how that, even with the rollback tax rate compared to even 4 years ago, we're still down in terms of what that spread is. And then the other part is as well too, so that we could implement the $11 minimum wage in fiscal 2020, the fourth quarter, and then also to help us start building up our cash reserves. So those are some of the reasons in terms of why we're coming to the court with going with the rollback tax rate. We can come back to this. So what this will represent is, now we're getting down to about the last couple of slides. You can see here in terms of where we've been in 2017, the district as a whole, there was a negative change, a decrease in that position of about $41.1 million. In 2018, we improved that to a decrease of $31 million. Right now, we are forecasted 2019 to come in about 9.7 million decrease, and then in 2020 about 1.3 million dollars. Under the effective tax rate scenario, which is the next slide, the difference then that would be about 6.5 million in terms of the expected decrease in that position for the district as a whole. In terms of where this is, in terms of where we are for total cash, The total cash under the rollback tax rate scenario is that we would come in at probably about 48 million unrestricted cash and investments at September 30 of 2019, and under the effective tax rate scenario, that would be about 43.1 million. Two other slides. What we have on here, we want to go back and show in terms of what has been the district's unrestricted cash position going back over the last 10 years. So back in 2011, in the furthest left column, can't see her, but that's about 124.5 million. You can see the first drop off occurred in 2012, and that was the investment in the El Paso Children's Hospital at that time. Keeping in mind when El Paso Children's Hospital opened, you know, they went about 6 months without any cash payments because they had to apply for the Medicare license and their Medicaid license, and then get all their insurance contracts. So a lot of that was startup money. So that was the first drop off, and you can see that we were holding steady at that 60 to 70 million dollar range, and then we had a drop off in 2018 as the line of credit for El Paso Children's. There's a 9 million advance payment under Europe. And then back then there was about a $5 million district deferral. So that led to that second drop. But then the goal that we're trying to do now is to increase the cash reserve, because that's one of the items that the rating agencies have been commenting on for the past couple of years in terms of our low liquidity.
And then 2018 also included an additional 16 million in expense as we took over more about half of the contracts that were being covered under EPCCS. So we transferred $40 million in medical contracts, physician contracts, that resulted in a total of about a $16 million incremental expense to us as well, and that also impacted us in 2018.
And the last slide was just going over our 2020 routine capital budget. On the UMC is about $10 million, El Paso Health $2.1 million, and then El Paso Children's $950,000, for a total district capital budget of about $13.1 million. In addition to that, as part of our 2013 bond issue, there are planned construction costs of about $10 million to complete the northeast and the east emergency rooms, the cath lab renovation, and then the currently interventional lab that's going to be opening up soon. So with that concludes the presentation, but now I want to open it up for any questions or comments.
Did Michael put you out to sleep?
Let me look at the audience.
We spoke about the compensation for your lowest paid employees, and I know that we didn't get into the details on it here.
So the rollback rate includes going in the fourth quarter of 2020 to the $11 minimum wage. And we know that at Congress, they're talking about going as high as $15. So we need to every year start looking at how do we stair step ourselves up to that level to really minimize that gap if and when that gets approved, and probably will be in the next couple of years. Our employees are our foundation. And so, you know, when we do the market adjustments, which this is, I think, the fourth year that we've been doing it to keep our employees at competitive rates, which is demonstrated by our low turnover rate compared to the state and national levels. It's, you know, we looked at that. We increased our contribution to our retirement fund, not as high as maybe the county is, but certainly a big improvement over what it was before. We're still looking at market adjustments, especially for the entry-level employee. Not only did we address that part of it this year, but we'll be addressing it next year, on top of trying to work to the $11 minimum wage.
Another item of going to the $11 minimum wage, although we show here that it's a 1 quarter's cost of about $1.2 million, Annually, that's about a $4.8 million cost. But this also does address compression issues. As you move up the minimum scale from 10 to 11, then we have to then adjust from 11, 12, going forward as well. So that's our estimates right now to address, to increasing one, the minimum wage from 10 to 11, but also salary compression issues that's going to create.
And we have the same concerns here at the county insofar as compression. We touched on it when we met, and I know that it's a huge amount from fourth quarter, pushing it up to the first quarter. And one of my concerns is when you allow it to take effect in the fourth quarter, that the cost of living has eaten up at that during the first three quarters. So as we move forward, before we finalize it, if you can give it one more look to see what kind of adjustments that can be made to better serve those employees that you have at that range, that maybe
We'll
push
look
them
at
up.
that. And typically, we have made our adjustments the last few years in the fourth quarter. So even though it may seem like the fourth quarter is pushing it down, it is about every fourth quarter of the fiscal years when we made these kinds of adjustments. But we'll look at that.
Speaking of salaries, in relation to minimum wage, you say $11 an hour. If you have an employee who has, say, 15 years of service, how do you base their salary? Based on years of service, level of experience? Let's say a nurse's assistant has 15 years of service, but they don't make $11 an hour.
So I know with Lorena, who's our chief administrative officer, they take into account years of service. They take into account what the position pays for. So every position has a market rate. And then when we do these compression issues, we take into account where is that employee within that market rate, and you do take into account the years of service. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we do take all that into account to come up with their final wage.
So Commissioner, in that example, we have a scale. So somebody that has 0 years of experience would come in at the very minimum of that scale.
Right.
But if they had 15 years of experience, we give them credit for each year of experience up to 13 years. So 13 years will take them to midpoint. If they have additional education over what's required in the job description, then they also will get additional credit for that as well.
Well, I will say this. I'm having personal experience of being a patient at your facility on 2 occasions, most recently. You have a very good facility. You have very hardworking employees. The service that I received, I'll speak for myself, but so I assume it based on the service I received that everyone else getting the same type of service, quality service. Your people in your emergency room were top notch. In fact, there's I can't remember the doctor's name, but I want to talk to you about her in the emergency room. I know she was a doctor. I thought she was a nurse or a nurse assistant, but she was heading up your. Anyway, the service and the attention to detail was great. I always say that my time in the Army, and I led soldiers, and we always say that you take care of these soldiers, and the soldiers take care of your mission.
And at my age, these young doctors look like they're too young. And then people remind me it's not that they're too young, it's just I'm getting too old. But they're a great group. I've seen their service throughout the floors, and sometimes even before I even know, patients been there for days. And the service is a testament to the type of associates we get. They care for their patients, they have compassion, and it really is a calling to them, and all credit goes to them. They're an amazing group. Our job is to make sure that they have the right tools and time and compensation to continue to do their job well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jacob, will you address a little bit on the challenges for workforce, for recruiting, things that are happening in the market that might be a challenge that you didn't have, or just a little wider scope kind of?
Well, I mean, I could tell you that, one, a lot of times statewide or, region, that, you look at some of the areas like Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, people just move around. El Paso is so isolated on the far west side that we tend to have to grow our own. So we do a lot of work with the Texas Tech School of Nursing, UTEP School of Nursing, as well as their health sciences programs for therapists, speech therapists, physical therapists, and so forth. We have a residency program with UTEP for the pharmacy school for a residency program. We work with El Paso Community College with their nursing staff and some of their other healthcare providers. We grow our own. And in so doing, we try to help keep young El Pasoans in town. Additionally, with Texas Tech, we provide the salaries for 200 residents and fellows. And so, these are doctors. They're not students. They're actual doctors that are here supplementing their training so that they can practice fully. Some will go on to get specialty training, others will stay. And our goal is to keep as much as we can. I've asked Dr. Lang for this. I know it's got a significant number in terms of with tech, without tech. How many doctors do we have in El Paso? And I really do believe that with the Texas Tech Association as a teaching hospital, they have greatly affected the amount of physicians we have that are serving El Paso. And despite that, we have about half of what per 1,000 of physicians that other Texas cities have. So we still have a ways to go, but we continue to work on not only building on what we have, but looking at new services and new training programs for doctors to be subspecialists in other areas that we need in El Paso. We have to invest in our own people. Like you, Judge, we all grew up in that area, and it's amazing that when I go through there, how many people have a history in the El Paso area, growing up there, either near there or around there. How many have first, second, third generation family members working there? So we not only generate jobs, but we help generate jobs that provide care for those that are most vulnerable in our community.
Yeah, Workforce Solutions is looking at clusters, and we're really worried, not so much in this industry, but we have to sort of keep an eye on that because there's other industries that are surprising us where they're lacking people or companies not wanting to come in because we don't have the right workforce. So, I appreciate what you're doing with Jefferson, what you're trying to accomplish there, and
With
the organic,
school,
the magnet
but it's
school.
not just the Silva Magnet, it's, at Bel Air's, the Isleta Magnet program.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that we've talked about doing to enhance that even further. So there is a great opportunity to develop our campus even better in partnership with Tech, our community doctors, our own UMC doctors, certainly programs that will enhance the service provided and truly make that a medical center for El Paso.
Well, you're being proactive instead of waiting to see what happens with our workforce. 'Cause we really appreciate that because it's been a challenge in some other areas already. And, we had lost population, and so we got to keep an eye on this ability to recruit and also to retain.
I agree.
Well, one last thing, speaking of challenges and capacity, once again, the past 2 weeks some people don't know this, but I was a resident in your palace there, that you were operating at capacity almost for the past 2 weeks. Because I know that in the emergency room, there was a long wait for those that need to be admitted to wait in the emergency room for hours, in some cases a day or two, before there was a bed came available to move into whatever department, based on the ailment, where you place them. So I find it amazing, but give you kudos from the standpoint that despite that, the efficiency for the ones that I encountered was great still.
Well, and you know, we added clinics, and our outpatient visits are getting close to about 1 million a year. They've gotten busy, yet the ED continues to grow. Opening up these satellite ED/urgent care centers that are going to be offering 24/7 service, we're going to see more growth. Fortunately and hopefully that some of that growth could be addressed in the northeast and east without having people have to drive all the way down to the center part of town to RED. But it continues to grow. Inpatient beds, we're capping out, both at Children's and at UMC. You know, we'll be visiting you all in a few months with our consultants' capacity plan, and to see, you know, what ways can we address that so that we're not finding ourselves where we have to turn away patients. We never want to be able to do that. We know that, you know, more and more patients are coming to us that have insurance, but we also have to make sure that those that don't have a home with us as well.
Yes.
Where in the budget is the county correctional clinic? Just the reason why I'm asking is I'm wanting to make sure you all, where you have included the inclusion of the revenue for mental health and the expense for mental health.
So with that, now in the detailed schedules, we have the four affiliates: University Medical Center, Children's, El Paso Health, and the Foundation. The cost for the jail services are in the UMC column. Now on the revenue section, there's a line item called contract revenue. Though that's where the revenue is. Now the expenses, when you go down to the operating expense section, that's where we break it out. It's not. It's buried within the UMC column. But if we want, we can provide that separate to you in terms of what is, what salaries, what's benefits, what are, your non-labor expenses.
And I think you're
So we can
referring
get that for you.
You're referring to EHN, right? Their component, the mental health component.
Okay.
Because that's becoming an expense under your FY20 budget.
Should be, yes.
Yes, exactly.
I'm sorry, were you looking for specifically the cost of the county correctional
She
center?
wants to make sure that in the county correctional contract, the component that they've been paying to Emergence Health is included in our budget since they're now rolling under us.
So it'll be a revenue and an expense.
Yes, okay. So we can get those specifically where it is in those, we can show you just a separate income statement just for those services, the revenues and expenses.
Any other questions?
Commissioner Perez.
Thanks. Thank you, Jacob and Michael, for the presentation. I guess I had a question regarding the revenue budgets and the expense budgets, and the numbers that were provided to us for the 2020 book. I guess how they differ from the 2019. And I don't know if I'm missing something, but in the 2020 book, the revenue budget on page 7, it shows that the revenue budget is $849 million, an increase of $58 million. But in the fiscal year 19 budget, it had total revenues of $680 million budget assumptions.
Is that on page 7?
Yeah, so it's on page 7 of the fiscal year 2020 book.
That's an error on my part, would be 856.
Okay, not 849.
Correct.
Okay. But in the fiscal year, in last year's budget, there was a revenue budget of $680 million. So it said that it was an increase of $58 million. Is there something that I'm missing there? And it's the same thing with the expenditure account. It says that there was in the 2020 book, it says the expense budget is $857 million, an increase of $56 million. But in the fiscal year budget that we just passed last year, it said the total expense budget was $689.
The difference between the two, when we came with the proposed budget last year for 2019, those are the initial numbers. What we're showing here when we're comparing the 2020 budget to the 2019 forecast. So the 2019 forecast is different from the 2019 budget. So what we can do, we can show a reconciliation in terms of the revenues as to what we presented for the 2019 revenues and expenses compared to what we're forecasting for 2019. Keep in mind that our volumes have grown quite a bit. So we can provide a reconciliation between what we brought 12 months ago now versus what the forecast is.
Budget to forecast the budget.
Okay. Okay. On the number of FTEs in 2020, it says the proposed budget has 3,566 FTEs for an increase of 302 FTEs, or 9%. And then, but in the last year's budget, and again, this is also a change, it said that what was initially proposed was 2,842 FTEs.
So again, we'll need to do the reconciliation of what we budgeted to the actual, because if volumes are higher, then our productivity standards allow us to hire more staff to make sure we maintain a safe number of employees to the type care that's being provided.
And the other item on that, just to make sure that we're apples to apples, I think in last year's number that you're showing, that only represented UMC and El Paso Health, whereas in this year's presentation, we've included the district as a whole to include El Paso Children's. But we'll do a reconciliation that shows what are the components that made up last year's numbers, and then to include El Paso Children's, so that way we're doing an apples to apples comparison. Because this year's budget, what we try to illustrate more is from the district as a whole, as opposed to previous years. We've come, we'd come to present here as UMC and El Paso Health and the Foundation, and then El Paso Children's. But now, since El Paso Children's has been now part of the district since 2016 for a couple of years, we wanted to show just the entire district budget.
So
But
what we'll do is revenue, expense, and FTE.
yes.
Okay. Yeah, I figured it, because it didn't specify that in last year's
Okay.
budget, so that would be helpful. Let's see, and then I think on page 47 of the PowerPoint presentation. So one thing I always, how is uncompensated care calculated? Again, I'm trying to go through all, the various presentations from this year and last year. Let me see. So on page 47, we have those totals, and then here on page 11 of the 2020 book. It seems so we have charity care, and then now we have provision for doubtful accounts, and it's the total uncompensated care charges. And then there's another line that wasn't in last year's budget, but that's where it says estimated costs to provide uncompensated care. I guess, so how is that calculated?
Okay.
Because on last year's budget, I guess we didn't get that extra line. We had charity care, bad debt expense, and total. And just a lot of these totals just, they don't line up for, for the forecast for 2019, in 2020, it shows $459 million in the budgeted amount. Actually, I'm sorry, the budgeted amount does line up, but the previous year, so the 2018 budget shows $405 million. The actual was through. So I'm just curious how that last line is calculated, because that's actually the number that you're using to demonstrate that the level of uncompensated care relative to.
Correct. Now, okay, so first off, when we look at our entire charge structure in terms of on the inpatient revenue charges at gross and outpatient revenue charges at gross. So then we compare it to all our operating expenses, salaries, employee benefits, non-labor expenses such as purchase services, supplies, et cetera. So we get what's called a cost to charge ratio. So and that's normally about, I think it averages about 40%. We can provide you a schedule because there's an amount. So there's a schedule strictly for UMC, and then another one for El Paso Children's, and then a total. So that way that we can provide that to you over the past couple of years. But that's how it's calculated. We take our charges, and then we look at our costs, and that's about 40%, and then so we make an estimated range, the cost times 40%. That's our uncompensated care cost.
Okay.
But we have a detailed schedule.
What we would charge, but what it actually costs us. So when we look at the graph on slide 47, we're not telling you here's what we charge. We're telling you here's what it actually costs us, because we could charge anything. So here's what it actually costs us, which is that bottom line on page 11 that correlates to slide 47. Here's the actual cost that we incur in uncompensated care versus the actual dollars we get on M&O, and what that gap is.
And one of the things that we had talked about in previous years, now, on the M&O tax, I mean, that's only, UMC receives property taxes, El Paso Children's does not. So we want to make sure that we're comparing the revenue with the expenses. And in some cases, we've either included or excluded El Paso Children's, but we can lay you out a schedule, for these.
But the methodology has been consistent
Yes,
throughout the
it's
years?
been consistent, yes.
Okay. On the cost of, I guess, merit increases, I think in this budget, it's 3.2, and I think there was another 3 million last year. Is it possible at all, I guess, to get a list of whether it be just position, it doesn't have to name individuals, but of the positions, I guess, that have gotten merit increases, over the years? I think that's, we're trying to do the same thing with our staff here as we're going through, not just merit increases, but also the market adjustments as well.
Sure.
We're trying to do that as well. We had a 7-year plan for market adjustments, and now we're just trying to take inventory of what was the cumulative effect of those market adjustments. And so I think that'd be helpful too, just to see.
We could do the merit and the market adjustments done by job classification to get you those for the last few years.
Okay. And then finally, we've had discussions regarding, I guess, the level of property tax, for the hospital district, and you had a slide up there that compared it to, your peer hospitals throughout the state, and we had a conversation that, I think it's even Parkland or whatever the lowest hospital was approximately 32%. And I mean, is that the long-term goal, is to get UMC to the 30%?
I mean, it would be nice if one day we could. That I don't think that's realistic given our tax base. We're using this as an illustration to show that this is how, in part, not just what the property tax revenue on the maintenance and operations side, how it represents a small part of our budget compared to the other 4 big public hospitals in Texas. But it also illustrates then how hard UMC works in trying to generate revenue to offset that shortfall we get in property tax. The reality is that our maintenance and operation tax revenue is not keeping up with the uncompensated care. And so when we try to attract people with insurance, when we try to look at ways to reduce denials, when we look at our expense management and look at ways to trying to operate efficiently, all those go to making up that shortfall. And we were at the 32% of our total revenue budget made up by our M&O property tax revenue side. We'd be at about 150, 160 million versus the, I think it's 119 million. So $30 million difference. What that means is there are things we're not able to do that other communities like us do, like dialysis clinics and things of that nature. But we also recognize the pressure. When the CAD shows a drop on the commercial and industrial side, the pressure is on the residential side. And so really, do we want to get to 32% or 38% or 50%? That kind of a jump would be so strong. It would take many, many, many years, tens of years. It wouldn't be done anytime short as a shortfall. Our goal is how do we continue to operate efficiently? How do we continue to attract revenue-producing services so that we can continue to operate without being that kind of a burden? So you asked me, do I ever think it would ever go to the 32%? I think it should have always been there, but I don't think we're going to be able to see it get there. The cost to increase, the percentage of tax increase will be so great, it just, I don't think it's realistic.
But, and then is the goal then to at least cover the uncompensated care portion, because that's also a pretty sizable.
Well, and I don't, that's even worse, because if you look at the M&O, to cover the uncompensated care would mean that the tax revenue from maintenance and operation would have to double. So that'd be, instead of 19 cents, I would imagine it'd be 38 cents. This community couldn't absorb that. So our goal then is when we look at things like some of the subspecialty areas, working with our partners at Tech and others, how do we try to operate? I mean, the reality is that the maintenance and operation tax component has not kept up with our uncompensated care. The reality is that our tax base is different than Houston and San Antonio and Austin. To be able to get the uncompensated care covered through M&O would be so great that I don't think the community could sustain it. To try to get us to a 32% might be a little easier, but the intent today isn't to get us there. And even if we did this over 5-6 years, I don't think we would be able to get there. So in our discussions as a team, it's never been how do we get to the 32%, but how do we be able to get to a certain level to try to at least break even, to do the things our associates need, like the minimum wage, to be able to provide the services our community needs. So I think UMC as an organization, and not a credit to me, it's the people behind me, it's the people around this table, it's everyone. That pie chart really shows how hard UMC works. Unlike, and I don't want to say unlike, compared to other public hospitals in trying to provide the care we provide and that our population deserves without trying to be a burden on the population. So when I say, well, there's a tax increase, but the pie chart and the bar chart is to show and to illustrate that tax increase still puts us behind compared to the other big safety net hospitals that have the same issues we do. We don't get a discount on pharmacy drugs. We don't get a discount on employing doctors. At times, we have to pay a premium to get them in. So, and we don't get a discount on equipment and technology. We pay like everyone else. So, really it illustrates that the organization works very efficiently in trying to provide the service with whatever we get in terms of revenue, but that we are slowly widening that gap. And so the rollback helps us sort of try to address it, but it only addresses less than half of it. So
The other item, Commissioner, is that looking at this slide, particularly as we're getting ready for our rating agency calls on Thursday in 2 weeks and at the end of the month, I mean, we can look at the positive trends since 2017 in terms of how we've improved operations. So from the rating agency's perspective, the closer and closer, I think it was Carmen, you were telling this to us when we were talking about our budget, is we can get closer and closer to the break even. That's even just a better story to tell to the rating agencies in hope that, okay, can we remove some of the negative outlooks to a stable outlook, and then possibly if our operations continue to improve, then maybe we can get our bond rating to be upgraded by 1 or so. So that's kind of more the in terms of what I'm calling the short-term goal from the from the rating agency's perspective.
Yeah.
So that's.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate all the work that you all have done to increase revenues in other areas, because it's it challenges all local governments in here. The fact that our tax base is 4 times smaller than what it is in Bexar County, and it has an implication for the taxes that all taxing entities charge, and so it's just a matter of striking that balance. And I don't know if you all have identified a target, and at least for me, I think that would provide some clarity or roadmap. The number that I was reviewing earlier was at least in the budgets that Commissioner Leon and I have been here, the tax revenue has increased 45%, which is a pretty significant increase from the community, to support the hospital's mission. But it can't, that's unsustainable to keep growing at that pace, and I think we just got to strike a balance.
So to put it in perspective, our budget is coming in at what, $856 million. Going to the rollback rate will give us an additional a little over $6 million. So when you take that as a percentage of the $856 million, it's a very small percentage. When you look at hospital only, we would go from a 20% of our total revenue made up by the M&O side would only go up to 21%. So even the rollback rate does not make that big a change in that percentage of revenue that we have to generate. So we will continue to work hard in looking at our patient revenue and looking at other sources of revenue to grow. The level of care they provide, the quality that needs to be invested in terms of new equipment and technology, the skill set and paying right for the right associates with the skill set that they've invested in themselves for our benefit will always be a challenge. Do I see us going to M&O covering the uncompensated care? I don't think that's even feasible for 10 years. I mean, you'd have to double your rate. Well, I don't think we could do that. I don't think we should do that. We'll continue to do what we do, and the occasional increase on the M&O side is for us to try to, we build up our cash reserves, I think budgeted to $48 million, 2020. That's like, what, 21, 22 days of cash, which isn't much. I don't ever want to be the organization that builds so much cash, because that's cash that should be used to provide care for our community. But I'm trying to get us back to the recovery mode where we have some stability in our funds without compromising care, shutting services. There are services I think we owe to the community that we are in the process of creating and opening up. There's other services we haven't even begun to look at that we do need to look at. Going to the rollback rate of that 8% on the M&O side is not going to get us there. That is simply trying to help us in terms of a little bit on the cash, but also being able to address our associates to that $11 minimum wage.
Commissioner, this slide when we talk about on the this is the district revenue budget, but looking at the blue part in terms of the patient service revenue, now this is what we continue to improve. The patient service revenue being 39% back in 17, now it's almost 45%. So again, the larger that the portion of our patient service revenue is in our revenue budget, then enables us to be less on the other aspects. But that's the number one focus.
Sometimes you'll hear people say, well, maybe you should only take care of the uncompensated. Our tax base couldn't support that. So we do need to look at offering services that, quite frankly, we're not just there to provide care for those that can't pay. We're there to provide care for the community. And when you look at our association with the medical school, they need an area where they can provide the state-of-the-art level of service that, quite frankly, draws a lot of people from the community, regardless of whether they have insurance or not. And the better we do that, the less strain there will be on the property owners in terms of us being able to generate revenue from other sources beyond the property tax.
Jacob, if you have a comment.
Yeah, if I may. I think we all look at it from different perspectives, from the skill set that we bring to the table. But from my perspective, from the fiscal health of the organization, I think that the scenario that's brought forward here from a rollback perspective is solid, simply from the standpoint that, number one, we really do need a balanced budget, and we're closer this year than we've ever had. I think we're at $1.2 million. So from a balanced budget perspective, I think that is a good standpoint. And I asked staff to, during my briefing, I asked them to take a little bit closer look to try to close the gap. I think if you look at it from the ratings perspective, I think if we had been in a better position when they did the re-ratings scores, we could have possibly brought our ratings up a little bit. I think that also allows us to, in the future, be able to lower the cost of borrowing, right? So we want to be in a better ratings position so that we can lower the cost of borrowing, which in turn will help us on our debt whenever we could go out to issue new debt or refund the current debt that we have. So, there's a lot of components involved in bringing forward a balanced budget, but there's certain things that staff has done, and from my opinion, that have made significant improvements over the last couple of years. The other issue that I have, and I continue to have concern, is the position of the cash. We need to continue to increase the level of days. I think at one point we got up to 10 days, maybe a couple of years ago, 10 days of cash. At that point in time, you're starting to have to look at other means of either borrowing in order for able to float your expenses. So that would be an additional cost. So I think that continuing to focus on a balanced budget, continuing to improve your cash position, will go a long way to improving the overall fiscal health of the district. And so that's why, when we started looking at, making that recommendation to the court with regards to a property tax increase, that was the perspective that I looked at and would support the presentation, with the exception that, I still would like to get it to that balanced budget position. But I think that there's been a lot of work associated with getting us to this particular point.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And like I said, I think it's a matter of just balancing all these different needs. Not just the cash position, but then as we talk about capacity issues. I mean, that's inevitably going to result in a significant increase on the M&O side, which is, not going to help us to achieve, more cash on hand. And it's just, I hope that we're just carefully considering, how, the increases over the years and just be mindful that, it's difficult and, when we have the weak property tax base that we do.
Jacob, Cindy, Frank, one of the observations as a newcomer is that, I thank you for your conscientious, but there's a strong parallel between the way we're trying to operate and, I can't take a lot of credit, but they've done a really good job at making sure that you have quality, but that then you're very conscientious, very fiscal responsibility. And I see that that's going to be a good partnership, because if you guys were sort of headed in a different direction and not looking at quality and not worried about taxes and shooting for the 30%, that would be a huge, disconnect with the way I see that the Commissioner's Court is working, what Betsy is trying to accomplish with her department head. So I do appreciate how you're approaching it and how you're looking at it, and how close we are at the same. So we have a philosophical premise that seems very similar between the two of us.
Commissioner, a prime example is this expansion for us into Medicare. We're going to go in slow. We know that in 2 or 3 years it could be another $100 million of revenue for Paso Health, which helps the system in the long run, right? But today, in talking to Jacob, I think the key for us is that we're all focused on the same goals. Because as we go into these new programs, what we want to offer is quality, so people can choose us for the right reason. But also knowing that revenue is going to help offset some of the pressures in the districts, and that children's are setting in the same way. So you see this collaboration up between the three entities of trying to make sure that we're all following the same way, with the same goals and visions.
We have very similar challenges.
So I know we have the option of a second joint session meeting that we'll be glad to have if you like. If we've answered your questions, I think we have language that, if voted upon, gets us to, if we don't need a next session. But that is really up to you.
Being a newcomer, I really would appreciate, I think I could be more effective if we had an opportunity for us internally to look at things, sort of get up to speed with, my learning curve would be enhanced. And so I would like, if it favors everybody, to have something in between, then have a meeting, and I think would be more prepared to be a stronger partner and have a better understanding.
So Betsy, we have the next work session scheduled August 6th.
Or
you want
Tuesday.
to move that to
Too quick.
Tuesday? You want to move it to?
So, would it be possible to move it to the end of the week, because Commissioners Court is meeting on the 7th? We could have it on your agenda for your own internal discussion on the 7th.
Perfect.
And then a joint meeting with UMC either the 9th or the following week on the 14th.
Okay, we can possibly do that, but based upon the way that the calendar is set, doesn't mean that, that can always move, but currently right now we have Monday, August 12th as a date to propose the tax rates. Now, how would that work if we were to move the work session to after the 12th?
I don't think that's too late, but I would need to verify that on the timeline, but I don't think it's too late.
It might be better to try to move it the week of the 5th, towards the end.
Right, if the court meets on the 7th, then they'd probably be prepared to meet with UMC again on the 9th.
Yeah, because when I was thinking about that and discussed with Betsy, I wanted to make sure I wasn't pushing things at your end, that there would not be
Why don't we
accommodating.
do this, if you give us a chance, we'll assume another joint session, and then we'll work with Betsy on a calendar of that. And we'll send a revised calendar to everybody.
Perfect.
So based on that, do we need any action?
So no action for item number 3.
So for the record, there was no action taken on the items discussed today. Are we prepared to adjourn?
We are.
So on my side, may I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. Second? Okay. The Board of Managers and El Paso County Commissioners Joint Commission Special Budget Work Session is officially adjourned. The time is 4:02 p.m.
This concludes today's meeting at 4:02 p.m.
So adjourn.